Just called Jaren Jackson Jr. Captain America. Steve Rogers himself, Triple J, the unicorn from Memphis, Tennessee, balling out at Team USA camp. FIBA basketball just weeks away, and Jaren is looking like he is in NBA form. But will that translate to FIBA form? Will that help him get better for the Memphis Grizzlies? And is he indeed Captain America? Is he this iteration of Team USA's best player? We're going to talk about that on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is another Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies, and we are so excited to have you with us wherever you are checking us out on wherever you get your podcasts, over on YouTube. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, all those fun things. As proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts here on Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax of Bluff City Media. I also contribute over at SB Nation, joined by Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal. They're in Memphis, Tennessee. He's the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. So glad that you're with us on this Monday. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. Damichael, it's a great way to start your work week when you look up and you see over The Athletic Joe Vardon doing an unofficial poll of Team USA camp. And most folks seem to think that Jaren Jackson Jr. is the best player out there at training camp for Team USA. Now, we're going to talk more about that later in the show, but just the overall article, again, Joe Vardon wrote it at The Athletic. If you're not already subscribed to The Athletic, you most certainly should be. I'm still kind of mad at them for not having a Memphis section, but that's neither here nor there. We don't have the time for that. But it is cool to see other people recognizing the growth of Jaren, not just literally, but also as a basketball player. The article itself is well worth the read, and it'll put Grizzlies fans in a good mindset to start off their week, that the guy that's going to have to carry the torch for the Grizzlies going into the start of next season with Morant being suspended looks already to be in mid-season form.
Yeah, it's been pretty much all positives when you talk about Jaren Jackson Jr. at Team USA camp. If you've been following closely what's been happening with Team USA over there, the first quote-unquote big news that you probably heard was when the select team, comprised of actually some pretty good young players, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, and, just a bunch of talented guys in that second group. But they beat the big team. They beat the FIBA World Cup 2023 team in 2, I believe, 10-minute scrimmages there were. So people were like, oh, what's going on? But once the dust settled, I think one move that was made was, I think, saw reports where Steve Kerr moved Anthony Edwards into the starting lineup, which I don't know why Anthony Edwards wasn't in the starting lineup the entire time. But I think the starting lineup with Anthony Edwards, they took out Cam Johnson and put in Anthony Edwards. So now, at least from what I've seen and heard, it's Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards, Mikal Bridges, Brandon Ingram, and Jaren Jackson Jr. And
that's 100% what it should have been all along, for the record. Like that might be the definition of Steve Kerr overthinking this thing.
It's not nothing new if you've been following Steve Kerr for a while here. But listen to those names we just said. At point guard, Jalen Brunson, who clearly just established himself as an upper-tier point guard this past year.
There are some people that incorrectly say that Jalen Brunson is better than Morant, or they'd rather have Jalen Brunson than Morant at this stage of their careers.
I remember that.
For the record, I do not say that. I think it's ridiculous. Don't get mad at me in the comments, please. I am agreeing with Damichael and all of you that I would much rather have Morant than Jalen Brunson, even with all that Morant is going through. Carry on.
Exactly. And then you got Anthony Edwards, one of the top rising stars in the game. Love his two-way game. Brandon Ingram, all-star. Mikal Bridges, I don't have to speak that much on Mikal Bridges. We know how you love Mikal Bridges as much as anyone.
I daydream about Mikal Bridges.
What could have been, right?
But what might have been, absolutely.
And then there's Jaren Jackson Jr. So you listen to those names that we just said, and the fact that he is standing out in a group like that is noteworthy to me. Jaren's game, as I said, and as you've said in the past, the physicality, I think will be good for him because we talked in the past about how, physicality hasn't been the biggest strength of his game until this past season. He really showed that growth where he showed, hey, I can play bully ball too. I think the comp that you've kind of used in the past was like a Giannis light or something like that. Is that exactly what you used?
Yeah.
And just going off of that, like you started to see more of those flashes like this past season where it's like these dudes are just too little. But his game is tailor-made. I mean, the playmaking and the fact that Team USA is playing him at the 5, it allows him to expand his game to levels we haven't even seen with the Grizzlies.
Right. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the show. And there's certainly several things that Damichael and I have already discussed that we're excited about Jaren doing when it comes to FIBA. But there's surprisingly one glaring omission that we haven't mentioned as often that some of our listeners and viewers on Locked On Grizzlies are probably screaming as they listen. You have to talk about this. Well, we will get to it on this edition. Make sure you stick around as we close out the show here in a bit. But Damichael, I think, before we get to if Jaren is truly the best player on the team, that's an important distinction to make, right? Like in this particular run of basketball, Jaren Jackson Jr. was voted the best player. But when you hear names like Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Anthony Edwards, who just signed a max contract extension, Brandon Ingram, former All-Star, you have a lot of talent around Jaren, and Jaren's no slouch in terms of accolades, right? Reigning Defensive Player of the Year, certainly carries a lot of water. I'm curious to see as scrimmages happen, with other countries, as the actual tournament begins, how they utilize Jaren. And obviously we'll be breaking down the games here on Locked On Grizzlies because FIBA World Cup basketball is manna from heaven in the dog days of the NBA offseason. So we're definitely going to be analyzing it. I'm curious to see how Steve Kerr, the guy that wanted to start Cam Johnson instead of Anthony Edwards.
Give him. He's probably just testing the waters.
Well, and Cam Johnson's a good basketball player. I'm not trying to say he's not, but right. And I'm sure that's why Steve Kerr. Anyway, I digress. I'm curious to see. It's like having a celebrity shot when you're playing, soda pong for our family-friendly audience or something like that. Or you phone a friend on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I just dated myself. The idea of a new coach taking this exact same talented player, different rules in FIBA, as we've alluded to before, but how Steve Kerr and his staff views Jaren Jackson and how they use him compared to how Taylor Jenkins utilized him. I think that's going to be really interesting to watch. And again, on the international stage, it's a little bit different, but it's still a different coaching set of eyes, a different scheme, same player. How will Jaren look different compared to his Memphis run that he gets every season, obviously, as a member of the Grizzlies?
Yeah, I can't wait to see that, too, because here's the thing. If you're familiar with Team USA and just the last 15, 20 years of Team USA basketball, big men don't get fed the ball. It's very much the guards, the forwards doing a lot of the scoring. And the bigs, they get rebounds, they dive, they set screens, they dive, do a couple pick and pops, 3-pointers. But you go through the history of Team USA, whether it's the Olympics, whether it's the World Cup teams, it's Kevin Durant, it's Devin Booker, Jason Tatum in recent years, it's Donovan Mitchell, it's LeBron, it's Carmelo Anthony, it's those guys. If you go back to what was that 2008, where Dwight Howard was clearly one of the most dominant players, on that redeemed team, but his role there wasn't post touches for him. That he was just cleaning the glass and just throwing down dunks over people. So it'll be interesting to see because Jaren has, as we've kind of gotten to know, Jaren has guard skills. So you can give him the ball and allow him to operate in certain situations like a guard. We've seen Jaren, he loves to face up and things like that. But what Team USA has done historically, if you go back to the last 15 or so years, it's just a lot of the 5 is basically someone who's going to protect the rim, catch lobs, That's pretty much your role. But that's not really Jaren. So I want to see how that meshes. Does Jaren become like just that type of rim running guy with this team? Or is he going to be that guy where he's like, look, I'm not like those past centers. They had Tyson Chandler, at center. They had DeAndre Jordan, those type guys. I'm not like those guys. Or Bam Adebayo. I got a little bit more to my bag.
Well, as we've mentioned before, the Team USA is under new management, right? Grant Hill, Steve Kerr, we mentioned a moment ago. So it's important to point out that maybe they will look different. Maybe things will be operating a little bit different. Obviously, Kerr has been part of Popovich and Krzyzewski's staffs in the past. So I think that maybe there won't be too much change. But at the same time, again, different set of eyes, different people constructing the roster. It's going to be interesting to watch it all play out. And we're excited to be covering it here for you on Locked On Grizzlies. How Jaren lines up with the fellow starters, other members of Team USA, how Jaren actually may be Captain America, Mr. United States. Is he the best player on this FIBA roster? Not just right now in terms of training camp, but period. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use those bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and much more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will talk Jaren Jackson Jr., best player on Team USA. Is that a true statement? We're going to break it down next. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, one of your hosts, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole, the commercial appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. I, of course, of Bluff City Media. And we'll be grinding forth with you all August. Again, not every day. Hopefully all of you will understand and appreciate and forgive us for not being with you every day in these dog days. But we will be with you most days, a majority of days during the week. Of course, we're here with you right now, and we're going to enjoy this time together. And Damichael, we're talking about Jaren Jackson Jr. being dominant, according to Joe Varden of The Athletic, an unofficial poll conducted. Jaren, the most impressive player at Team USA training camp to this point. We were talking about that roster, and I'll read it off again here. We've got Paolo Banchero, Mikal Bridges, Jalen Brunson, Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, a name that we haven't mentioned. Maybe he'll be like a sixth man for this group, and that's a pretty darn good sixth man. Josh Hart, gotta love Josh Hart as an energy defense guy. Brandon Ingram, the aforementioned Jaren Jackson Jr., Cam Johnson, inexplicably starting instead of Anthony Edwards, Walker Kessler, Bobby Portis, who's there just for the vibes, and another guy who's there because Desmond Bane can't be is Austin Reeves. And yes, I said that, so you can let the Lakers folks know that I said that. They won the series, but trust me, if Desmond Bane was 100% healthy, Austin Reeves is not.
How about we bring one of the brothers on and we have that conversation. We have that Bane Reeves conversation. But I think
that might be a good finals Wednesday here this month in the next couple of weeks. That's a good idea there to Michael. So anyway, I just read off the roster after getting mad at Austin Reeves for no reason. It's not his fault. I'm going to do a quick ranking to Michael, and you certainly don't have to do it this way because I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here. We didn't talk about this before the show. I'm going to do a top three.
Okay.
I think my number 3 right now, and it's important to specify right now because Brandon Ingram, you could probably argue, has had a little more success overall than this player. But number 3 for me is Jalen Brunson. He had a tremendous season, and he's probably tied with Anthony Edwards in that same way. When I look at those two guys, obviously very different games, but in terms of the level of impact, right, the type of player they are, I think if you want to say Edwards instead of Brunson, I'm okay with that. So those I'm doing a top 4. Okay, those two are tied for Brunson and Edwards. I'm already copping. I know.
Come on, Joe. Come on.
I know. So Brunson and Edwards are tied for 3rd. Mikal Bridges is number 2 because he's Mikal Bridges, and I love Mikal Bridges, and I think that he has a game that is really impressive and is going to flourish in FIBA just like it has in the NBA. I've got Jaren Jackson Jr. number 1.
Oh, wow.
And I don't think it's that crazy. You know, I do think you can make an argument for Bridges over Jaren, but you have the reigning defensive player of the year. You have a guy who has a level of experience that a lot of these guys, that are comparable to him, like Anthony Edwards. Edwards doesn't have the same level of experience that Jaren does, even though Jaren's still relatively young. And I just really think, while you can make an argument for Bridges in front of Jaren, I would prefer that versatility. Because of the FIBA rules and there being no goaltending, his skill set is just tailor-made for this style of basketball. And I think that's what, again, FIBA specific, best player in terms of FIBA basketball. I think Jaren is number one on this roster. I really do believe that he's the most important player for them. What say you?
I like what you said at the end. He's the most important player. I can agree with that because to me, there's a drop off from Jaren to Walker Kessler.
Oh yeah, that's not even a contest.
And Bobby Portis. There's a bigger drop off than going from Brandon Ingram and Mikal Bridges, to Banchero and Cam Johnson, so to speak, and things like that, and Anthony Edwards and Jalen Brunson and all those guys. I think there are a few guys, and here's how I want to address this, because he was voted the most impressive player there because of his performance, and we've talked about how his game fits there. To me, it's three guys that stand out, and it's not the guy. Mikal Bridges is a guy who I think great NBA player. FIBA, he'll be fine, but he's not going to stand out as much. He's not going to stand out as much. Team USA, historically speaking, the way they've kind of just dominated opponents is with their athleticism. You'll hear, I follow a lot of pro players across the world who don't play in the NBA, and a lot of them say the same things to me, where they say the NBA isn't necessarily the most talented players in the world. It's pretty much the most freakishly athletic guys who have a good combination of skill mixed with that athleticism. Like, that's a lot of the NBA guys. Like, no offense to Bismack Biyombo, but there are a lot of centers overseas right now who can hook shot you, hit you with turnarounds, and Busy isn't doing that. But Busy is a nice athlete who can block shots and rim run, and his game fits the NBA. With all that being said, here, I think for me, the top three are Jaren Jackson Jr., Tyrese Halliburton.
Ooh,
Tyrese has game, man. He's on that. Good. He's on that second unit for a reason. He averaged over 10 assists per game.
On that second
unit, I think, and honestly, he might end up overlapping Jalen Brunson in the starting lineup potentially. But that's another conversation. I do agree with you that Jaren Jackson Jr. Right now is the best player there. I will say this though. I will say it's very close to me between him and Anthony Edwards.
Yeah,
I think I honestly want to say Anthony Edwards, but the fact that he wasn't in the starting lineup is weird to me. But just how Jaren Jackson Jr.'s game is tailor-made for FIBA basketball, I think Anthony Edwards is, because he's that Dwayne Wade. He's that you remember how Dwayne Wade would come off the bench and dominate games for the Redeem team. And, just historically speaking, the LeBron James, those superb athletes, that's where Team USA separates itself. You're going to play a bunch of other countries who have players who can knock down open three-pointers and things like that. You're not going to play a bunch of teams who have a 6'5", 230-pound shooting guard who's faster than the opposing team's point guard and jumps higher than the opposing team's power forwards and centers. That's Anthony Edwards. I think he's going to be the leading scorer potentially. I think Brandon Ingram will be in that conversation as well. But you talk about converting defense to offense, that's what I'm thinking about. And Anthony Edwards and Jaren Jackson Jr. are in a league of their own in that category. Tyrese Halliburton is going to be the best creator of offense, which I was reading, about the struggles of Team USA when they were playing the select team. And it's the struggles a lot of us probably expected is they don't have a lot of those natural shot creators. They have some, they have BI. They have Banchero can get his own shot and whatnot. They have, Anthony Edwards. Mikal Bridges has done it more as of late, but it's not what he's been known for in his career. So with that, all that being said, I think Anthony Edwards and Jaren Jackson Jr. are the two who really stand out above the rest. And so you can make a strong argument that Jaren Jackson Jr. is the guy. Jaren Jackson Jr. is Mr. USA, as you said, partner.
Anthony Edwards, you're exactly right, especially because you've talked a lot about on Locked On Grizzlies how Team USA, at least historically, has scored a lot of isolation basketball.
Yeah, that's it.
I can't think of many dudes across the world. You know, the guys that can defend him in the NBA could obviously defend him in FIBA. He's going to be very difficult to defend in this level of basketball. And I do agree that the type of impact that Jaren can have, especially defensively, Edwards can have offensively because of his
and defensively.
And yeah, absolutely. I do think that if you were to sub out Brunson and put in Halliburton, that is interesting. I'm intrigued by that because of Halliburton's size. You know, obviously Brunson 6'2", more traditional point guard. Halliburton more of a combo guard, bigger frame. Playmaking, obviously, that's a real strength of his. So I am intrigued by that. And I'm also intrigued by Brandon Ingram as the 4 because Team USA is pretty tiny when you think about it. Jaren Jackson Jr. being the center that I always have wanted is an exciting thing.
You get your wish.
Yeah, and we're going to see how it works next to an even smaller stretch 4 in Brandon Ingram. But, you know, we've talked about Jaren improving as a playmaker, as a screener, all these things that FIBA can help Jaren Jackson Jr. with. There's one glaring omission, Damichael, that you and I have not discussed as much. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stay with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, your co-host for this Monday edition of the podcast, joined by my host that is a co as well, Damichael Cole, the commercial appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. He is the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. Follow him on Twitter at DamichaelC. You can follow me on Twitter at Joe Mullinax. Thank you so much for being with us each and every day that we are available here in the dog days of the NBA offseason. We're talking Jaren Jackson Jr. and his work at Team USA training camp in preparation for the FIBA World Cup coming up beginning later this month, towards the end of August. I think August 24th or 25th is when the first games get underway. Damichael, I have been banging the drum of needing to see Jaren become a better playmaker. That's been something that going back to the Lakers series.
We had a whole episode. Yeah.
Correct. For you, I know you've talked a lot about screen setting, being more of that traditional big, finding ways to help Ja Morant, because that's one of the elephants in the room, right? Like those two guys, it's not going to get better this season, obviously. The time together, the chemistry on the court, it's not what you would expect from a top 15 or so guard and a top 30 or so big man. It's just not there yet.
I always say Bane has more chemistry with each of those guys than those two guys have with each other.
I would agree, and it sounds like a subject for a future episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Yeah. But I do think that something that everybody has talked about Jaren needing to get better at, and you and I just haven't said it on this show, is his rebounding, right? Yeah. That is something that I will be fully honest. That's the thing I care least about, because I think the Grizzlies do a really good job in terms of team rebounding, gang attacking the board.
They do.
Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, both are very good rebounding guards. John Conchar, we've talked about here before about how good of a rebounder he is when he plays. So they have rebounded well as a team. Obviously, Steven Adams is the major piece of that.
Yeah.
Jaren is going to be the guy. Like we mentioned, Brandon Ingram being the 4 next to Jaren as the 5 in the starting lineup. Mikal Bridges is a solid rebounder, of course, and I do think that you'll see Anthony Edwards get down and try to get the ball in his hands as quickly as possible for those transition opportunities. But for Jaren to be the main piece of that front court rebounding, because he's the 5, how he attacks the glass, how he becomes an outlet passer in those transition opportunities for Team USA to take full advantage of their athletic advantage, because they're going to have an athletic advantage literally every game. There may not be, as you alluded to, there may not be a skill advantage every game, but there will be an athletic advantage every single time out. They got to maximize that. How do you do that? You get out and you run. How do you get out and run best? Watch Kevin Love outlet passes. Steven Adams has gotten pretty good at it. Anthony Davis is pretty good at it for the Lakers. So how do you get out and move? You got to be able to get the board, find your pass, and create the possession through that passing lane. We haven't seen Jaren do that a ton. So I do think that can tie to the playmaking a little bit, but just the ability to get that rebound and be that key cog in your extra possession on the offensive end, no extra possessions for the opponent on the defensive end, way of playing the 5 position. Jaren hasn't been asked to do that a ton. That's a real point of growth for him, I think, going into FIBA.
Yeah, Joe, as the kids would say, you're spitting right now. You're spitting.
I'm spitting hot fire. I'm keeping it 100, right? 100, is that right? Or is it 100?
No, it's 100. You're keeping it 100.
I'm keeping it 100.
Keeping it 100. Yeah. So we haven't taken it there with Jaren Jackson Jr. Yeah, we talk about all these areas of improvement, and you hit on a big one. And here's why, personally, I haven't emphasized it as much, because you said you haven't cared about it that much, right? Pretty much Steven Adams, he's like a mistake cover-upper.
Right. Steven Adams exists is a major reason why we don't talk about it.
Honestly, I feel like if I played the 4, the Grizzlies still would be one of the top rebounding teams in the NBA. If I played the 4 alongside of Steven Adams. But with all that being, that's just, it's more about how good Steven Adams is, and it masks you don't need Jaren to be this great rebounder. And it's not even just Steven Adams. I think I've said in the past, and you just touched on it, the Grizzlies, to me, are one of the best guard rebounding teams in the league, because Ja isn't necessarily just a guard rebounder who the ball comes off the rim and it goes straight to him. Ja will go up and get it over people. And Dez will go in there and get dirty. John Conchar, we already know that. So they're a really good rebounding team around Jaren to the point where he hasn't had to be a great rebounder. But when Steven Adams went down, it showed. It showed. The Grizzlies struggled to rebound, and you got this 6'11" guy, this massive wingspan, 240-plus pounds, and he's not dominating on the glass, as you would expect. So guess what? In FIBA, you're gonna play some big boys. Like Spain's got some big boys over there. I know they got an exhibition game against Spain, and several other countries. Serbia, they got some big dudes over there, and I can't wait to see how Jaren handles that physicality in order to put himself in position to rebound the basketball, how strong he is. I want to see how aggressive he is on the offensive glass too. These are things we haven't really seen Jaren do much of and haven't been emphasized as big parts of his games. I was waiting on you to pull up the numbers for us. That's what I was waiting on. I know Joe's got the numbers.
Put me on the spot.
I know
the numbers for.
I know you got the numbers because they're going to show it. We already know the numbers don't lie. They're going to show that Jaren Jackson Jr. has room to grow as a rebounder, and that's okay because again, personnel wise, it's fine with the Grizzlies, but this can take the Grizzlies to another level. I think it's eventually another conversation we can have closer to the season. But with Steven Adams back and Jaren being put in this position now where he has to become a better rebounder, take me back to the year the Lakers won the championship in the bubble. I believe that was 2020. Anthony Davis played the 4 a lot of that run, and that's kind of what put them, because the Lakers won a great field goal percentage shooting team that year offensively. They had Anthony Davis at the 4, and you would put guys like Dwight Howard, at the 5, and teams just couldn't deal with that because you got to keep both of those guys off the glass relentlessly, and that's just too tough. Like teams couldn't deal with that. Whereas with Steven Adams, teams are able to send a couple bodies at him, and they don't worry about Jaren as much.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie. We have a 29th percentile, and this is cleaning the glass. That's my personal favorite. 29th percentile in field goal offensive rebound percentage, and that means what percentage of his teams missed field goals that the player rebounds. That's 5.8%. That's, better than it was the previous season. Yeah. And then in terms of defensive rebounding percentage, he was at 16%. That's 38th percentile. So he's never been great at it. He has gotten better. For example, his sophomore season, he was in the 10th percentile in defensive rebounding. So he's better, but it's not an area of his game that you would say, yeah,
Still
that guy
a long
is
way
really
to go.
good.
Yeah.
But a friendly reminder, and I know you know this, Damichael, he's 24 years old in like a month or so, right? A few weeks. He's still very young. So while he has been in the league for a long time, he's a young veteran player in the National Basketball Association, and there's definitely still room for him to develop and grow. And I think FIBA is going to be a wonderful opportunity for that. The fact he's healthy, that he can do this, I know you've talked about minute restrictions and things like that. Yeah. I don't care as much about that, to be totally honest with you. I want the guy to go play and compete and be the best version of himself he can be, so that when he comes to training camp in a month and a half or so, he's going to be in a position to really dominate the way the Grizzlies are going to need him to dominate if they're going to do more than just survive the first 25 games of the season without Ja Morant. Thank you so much for checking out Locked On Grizzlies. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe, all those fun things as proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. And thank you, dear everydayer, for coming to Locked On Grizzlies every time you get a ping on your phone and notification. A new podcast is dropped. A new episode is live on YouTube. Continue to stick with us throughout the summer as we talk Grizzlies basketball here on Locked On Grizzlies. And Damichael, I think for our next episode, Finals Wednesday is in order. We're due a Finals Wednesday here in a couple days. And I do think that we could maybe take the same idea, under discussed aspects of games, Jaren's rebounding that we haven't talked as much about. What are some things that we need to see Desmond Bane get better at? What are some things we need to see Ja Morant get better at?
I can think of a couple for Luke Kennard too.
There you go. Yeah. Some things that haven't been as discussed. Maybe we dive a little deeper and try to find those extra inches that are everywhere around us, to quote Any Given Sunday, one of my favorite movies. If you're going to win a championship, somebody's going to have to make a drastic change. And
shout out to Willie Beeman, man.
That's right. And make a change that perhaps you didn't foresee coming. So maybe we dive into some of these key players, and similar to Jaren's rebounding, we haven't discussed that as much until just now. Maybe we discuss some other areas of growth for other Grizzlies on this coming Wednesday edition of the show.
I'm looking forward to it. I love the sound of that. And you know what? Like, with this team, it's so easy to have that conversation because they're all so young. Like, with David Roddy, Jake LaRavia, that whole second-year potential jump group, there's the third-year guys, so many guys that we can have this conversation about. So I'm honestly looking forward to how we squeeze that into that 30-minute window.
Well, maybe we just need to make it a two-parter. Who knows, partner? Maybe it'll be a Finals Friday as well on Locked On Grizzlies. 'Tis the season to stretch out content as best you can. But that's a little too inside baseball. You're here wanting to listen and talk Memphis Grizzlies basketball, and we appreciate you hanging out with Damichael and myself on this Monday edition of Locked On Grizzlies to do just that. Until next time, which will be our Finals Wednesday later on this week. That's Damichael. I'm Joe. Stay locked in, Grizzlies fans. Catch